Hi everyone! Today I am going to demonstrate how to measure different ingredients. So the first thing obviously I need to do is wash my hands. So I'm going to go over here to the sink and wash my hands for singing through two versions of Happy Birthday, because that is about how long you have to wash your hands. So I'm going to turn on the warm water, get them wet. Get some hand soap, start rubbing together, and then I'm going to start singing Happy Birthday to myself 2 times. Remember to wash the tops, in between the fingers, inside the hands, up to your wrists, all over, singing Happy Birthday 2 times. And rinse them off real good. And then I'm going to use a paper towel to dry them off. And then use the paper towel to turn off the sink. Okay, so now my hands are nice and clean. So I'm going to walk back over to my demonstration table. And I'm going to start with demonstrating how to measure flour first. So flour is a really interesting ingredient. It's very fluffy, very powdery. So whenever we measure flour, we want to use a special technique called stir and spoon. So what I'm going to do is get a large spoon, and for this I'm going to use a dry measuring cup. These are called dry measuring cups. They're used to measure dry ingredients, and they come in different sizes. And this is called a liquid measuring cup. We're going to use this later, okay? So first I'm going to start out, let's say that I'm making chocolate chip cookies, and I need a 1/2 cup of flour, okay? So what I would do is I would find the measuring cup that has 1/2 cup written on it, okay? And I need to make the flour nice and fluffy before I put it into the measuring cup. We don't want to pack it down. So this technique is called stir and spoon. I'm going to stir it, kind of fluff it up. Spoon it gently into the measuring cup, stir it and spoon it so it's overflowing, and then I'm going to use something to level it off with. Now you have a choice for this. You could use what this is called a frosting spatula. You could use one of these to level with. You could use a butter knife, the flat side, to level with if you have these at your home, or you can even use the flat side of a rubber scraper, or some people call this a spatula. Either ones are fine. I like to use the frosting spatula, and I'll call this a leveler. And what you want to do is just level straight across. And here you have a perfect 1/2 cup of flour. Now, if I didn't know what I was doing and I thought, oh, I should pack this flour in, watch what happens. I could actually take this spoon and pack this down. You can see not very much is falling out. It's just packing it down. And now I can add more. And pack that down. And now I can even add more. And pack that down. Okay? Now, do I really still have the right amount of flour? No. This is way too much flour. This is not the correct technique for measuring flour. Watch how it comes out. Comes out in just a big clump. So remember, whenever you're measuring flour, also this is true for powdered sugar too. Whenever you're measuring something fluffy like flour or powdered sugar, you want it nice and fluffy so that you have like nice fluffy cupcakes or whatever you're making. So you want to stir it, spoon it, stir it and spoon it so it's overflowing, and then take something to level with. I'm going to use the leveler here and level straight across, and that's a perfect 1/2 cup of flour. Okay, the next thing I want to demonstrate for you is how to measure sugar. Now one thing is usually, and in our kitchens here at North Lawn, we keep the flour in the larger canister and the sugar in the smaller canister, okay? So I'm gonna show you how to measure sugar now. Now with sugar, it's not fluffy like flour. So you don't have to stir it and spoon it. You can't pack it down. It's granular, so it's not fluffy. So you don't have to use the stir and spoon technique. You can just scoop it and level it off. It's actually a lot easier to measure than flour. So let's say I need 1/3 cup of sugar. All I have to do is find the measuring cup that says 1/3 cup. I'm just gonna scoop it and fill it so it's overflowing. Use my leveler and level straight across, and I've got a perfect 1/3 cup of sugar. Now some people will ask me, Mrs. Erler, why do we have to measure so perfectly? I've watched my grandma cook and she doesn't always measure perfectly. Well, that's probably because your grandma's been cooking for a long time and she's got a lot of experience. When you first start cooking or you're making a new recipe, it's very important, and especially if you're baking, which is more like a science experiment, it's very important to have very good measurements. If you measure correctly, you know your recipes will always turn out right. Okay, the next thing I'm going to show you is brown sugar. So I have a canister here of brown sugar. Brown sugar is very different from white sugar, okay? It has molasses mixed into it, so it kind of feels like wet sand. And it also is processed differently than white sugar. So there is the opposite technique for brown sugar than flour. Flour, we wanted it fluffy, and we had to stir and spoon it. Brown sugar, you have to pack it in the measuring cup. Now, it doesn't always say on the recipe, like 2/3 cup of packed brown sugar, but you just have to know whenever you're measuring brown sugar, you always have to pack it. So let's say I need 1/3 cup of brown sugar. So I get the 1/3 cup measuring cup, says 1/3 on it. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna dip it and fill it so it's overflowing. Then I'm gonna take my hands and pack it down as tight as I can. Okay, really pack this in there. Remember, brown sugar is opposite of flour. Flour, we want it fluffy. Brown sugar has to be packed in the measuring cup. So I have it overflowing still, even though I packed it. And then I'm gonna take my leveler again, level straight across. Now, if I measured correctly, brown sugar should pop out of the measuring cup like a little sandcastle. Ah, perfect. This would make perfect chocolate chip cookies or whatever I was making. Okay, the next thing that I'm gonna demonstrate is how to measure a liquid. So there's lots of different liquids that we cook with, mostly water, milk, oil. Those are some liquids that we use. So today what I'm gonna do is I have a measuring cup with some water in it that I put a little food coloring in so that you could see what I'm doing, okay? So I'm gonna get my liquid measuring cup. Now remember, this is called a dry measuring cup where you level across and they come in different sizes. This is called a liquid measuring cup where it's clear and you've got the measurements on the side. These are great for liquids. So let's say I need 1 cup of water for my recipe. So I'm gonna look and find 1 cup line on my measuring cup, right there, okay? I'm gonna set it down on my counter. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get eye level, because if you stand up and do it, it kind of is an optical illusion and it doesn't give you the right amount. So I'm gonna get down eye level and fill it up to the 1 cup line. Okay, and then I've got my perfect 1 cup of water. Okay, I'll put that back in here. Okay. All right, the next thing I'm gonna show you is baking soda and baking powder. Okay, so this one is called baking soda. It usually comes in a box, okay? This one is baking powder. It usually comes in a can like this. These two are not the same thing. You actually need both of them when you're cooking. If a recipe says baking soda, you have to put in baking soda. If a recipe says baking powder, you have to put in baking powder. You can't mix and match these, they're not the same thing. So like some recipes actually require both. So whenever you measure baking soda or baking powder, it's always gonna be a small amount. So in that case, we use measuring spoons. Measuring spoons are kind of like measuring cups, but they're much smaller. Now, they come in different sizes. The main thing is that you have to know is there is a tablespoon and there's a teaspoon. Why they made their names similar, I don't know. It's very confusing, but this is something you have to remember. The tablespoon has the initials, and they're capitalized, TBSP, tablespoon. It has a B in it. Think B for bigger. Tablespoon has the B. The teaspoon is usually in lowercase letters, and it just says TSP. There's no B in there. Okay, that's the smaller one. One TSP, that's for teaspoon. You have to be careful you don't mix these up. There are 3 of these in just 1 of these. So if you mix them up, it could be bad. For example, one time I had some students making some cookies, I think, and it was supposed to be a teaspoon of salt. They accidentally put in a tablespoon of salt. That's 3 times too much salt. Okay, it did not taste good. When they went to their tables to try their cookies looked beautiful. They looked delicious. But when they went to eat them, they all took a bite, they all spit them out at the same time. They were way too salty because they put in 3 times too much salt when they accidentally mixed up the teaspoon and the tablespoon. Okay, so to use these, what you do is, let's say I need a teaspoon of baking powder, okay? So I take the lid off. Now I like the can of baking powder because they always have this built-in leveler, which is really nice to use. So all you do is fill it so it's overflowing, and then run it along that little built-in leveler, and you've got a perfect teaspoon of baking powder, okay? Now, this one. I don't know why, but baking soda always comes in a box, and it's kind of hard to measure inside the box. Now, baking soda is similar to baking powder, but like I said, they're different. Baking soda has extra ingredients in it, so they don't work the same way. They're both used for making things fluffy, like muffins, cookies, things like that, making them nice and fluffy, so they rise while they're baking. But remember, they have different ingredients in them. Okay, so baking soda. Let's say I need 1 teaspoon of baking soda. What I do is, it has this cardboard here, and you have to be very careful the first time you open it. I like to use a pair of scissors and cut it. There's a little line there, but to show you where to cut. And you fold this back like that, and then you can fill it so it's overflowing. And if the cardboard is nice and straight still, you can actually use the cardboard as a built-in leveler, just like that. If it's not, if it's kind of all raggedy, you can fill it so it's overflowing, and then use your leveler and level across inside the box to get your teaspoon of baking soda. Okay, the next thing I'm going to show you is salt. So in your kitchen, you have 2 containers of salt in your kitchen here at school. You've got a large container of salt, and you've got a salt shaker. If you're adding like a pinch of salt or salt to your taste, you can just do a little sprinkling of salt, okay? If you're adding a teaspoon of salt, okay, you would get your teaspoon, and you'd get a teaspoon of salt. Now, sometimes I see kids doing this. Hum-de-dum, I'm measuring my salt. Yeah, this takes forever. You don't have to do it this way. That's why I give you a small container of salt. It's much easier if you take the lid off, fill up your teaspoon with salt, and level it across. Okay? So So if you need a measurement of salt, it's nice to have a container to measure it out of. If you just need to add some salt for taste, then you can use a salt shaker, okay? Also at home, you can always take the lid off of the salt to pour it into your measuring spoon if you're measuring at home. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about is how to measure things that are creamy. So when we're measuring things that are creamy, like peanut butter or butter, things like that, you're going to use a rubber scraper to measure something creamy. Let's say I need a cup of butter. What I would do is I'd scoop out some butter and pack it into the measuring cup so it's overflowing, and then level it off, okay? This is called a rubber scraper. Some people call this a spatula. This is for scraping the side of the bowl when you're mixing things and for measuring things that are creamy, okay? Like I said, this is sometimes also called a spatula. I call it a leveler, but really what this is for is spreading frosting on a cake, okay? And then, technically, this is also called a spatula. Now, I call this a pancake turner because we use it when we're flipping pancakes or in our class when we make our French toast, okay? But technically, all three of these are called spatulas. Okay, put these back. Okay, so today I've gone over different techniques for measuring different kinds of ingredients, and hopefully you can take this information and go into your own kitchen and practice using measuring cups and measuring spoons and the different techniques that I showed you.